data center, go-to-market, sales.
Hey, it's Joshua Feinberg from DCSMI, the Data Center Sales and Marketing Institute, and host of the Data Center Go-to-Market podcast. And I'm thrilled to welcome you to this week's Data Center Go-to-Market Sales and Marketing Q&A live show, where each week I tackle a little more than a handful, 6 of the biggest sales and marketing challenges that we're hearing about from all over the data center, digital infrastructure, and critical facilities ecosystem, regardless of where you sit on the go-to-market team. Perhaps you work in some kind of marketing or sales related role, such as an account executive, a sales development or business development, an SDR or BDR. Maybe you work in account management or client success, or some facet of marketing like digital, social, email, field marketing. Perhaps you work in some kind of product marketing or product management related role, or channel partnerships, channel account manager kind of role if your company has that kind of model. Or maybe you are the executive sponsor, the leader of the band, the orchestra conductor, responsible for recruiting the right people to your team, having them play the right instruments at the right tempo, at the right time, at just the right volume to make all this magical growth happen in this very special period of time in and around the data center industry. If this is the first time that you're joining us for Data Center Go-to-Market Sales and Marketing Q&A, I want to wish you a very special welcome, and be sure to let us know in the comments where you're watching us from and what you do in the data center industry. If you've joined us all before for this weekly live show, welcome back. We're thrilled to have you with us again. So what is on the agenda for this week? Oh, one quick thing. If you want to make sure that you get notified about upcoming educational events and resources just like this, make sure that you're subscribed to our weekly email newsletter that comes to your email inbox on Sundays. You can sign up for the Data Center Sales and Marketing newsletter on our website at www.dcsmi.com. So what is on the agenda for today? First up, we're going to look at how to improve colocation data center client acquisition. After that, we'll turn our attention to how a data center technology and consulting firm, a professional services firm, can improve its sales to the blockchain industry, how a data center technology and consulting firm can improve its sales to the blockchain industry. Then we'll look at how does a data center real estate tenant representative, DCRE, data center real estate tenant representative, and strategic advisor better qualify opportunities. Then we'll take a real quick break for a message from our sponsor. Then in the second half of this week's Data Center Go-to-Market Sales and Marketing Q&A show, we will talk about how to attract data center clients for networking solutions, data management and infrastructure, how wholesale data centers can attract and win new clients, as well as how a data center and cloud services marketplace business can improve its visibility with search engine optimization. SEO seems like a very, very timely question to be tackling right now, as the entire landscape in and around search engine visibility and generative AI is really, really changing that whole ecosystem. So, one more quick thing just to manage your expectations, especially for those of you that are frequent flyers that join us often for this live show or related webinars. I'm just getting over a little bit of a postnasal, a little bit of a cold. So if I stop to take drinks of water every so often, or I'm a little more hoarse than normal, you know why. But I'm thrilled to have you joining us for today's live show. So first up, one more quick thing as well. If you have an idea for a topic or a question or a challenge that you think we should address in an upcoming show, be sure to leave that in the comments on whatever platform that you're watching on, and we will add that to the consideration queue to address in an upcoming episode. So what's up first? What do we got? How do we improve colocation data center client acquisition? How does a data center operator that is primarily in the business of colocation improve its client acquisition, how it goes about getting new clients? That is a fantastic question. And what I usually suggest for most colocation operators is first we need to know your context. Because if you work for a huge data center operator, digital infrastructure company, like one of the 10 or 20 biggest in the world, your playbook for client acquisition is going to be quite a bit different, namely because your leadership team has much higher expectations for you being able to capitalize on the hundreds of millions or billions of dollars of brand equity that your company has built up with this brand on a global basis. At the other extreme are the 1 or 2 or 3 location colocation operators that are usually owner operated, closely held, and they may have a brand built up in their local community, but it may be a work in progress for how strong their brand is nationally and globally. And then there are the colocation operators that are somewhere in the middle, that have a few handfuls, maybe even a dozen or 2 dozen locations throughout their country, maybe even some international locations as well. And they typically not only have strong brand reputation, strong brand equity in their local community, but they have quite a bit of that in most of the regions that they do business or want to do business in. So I'm going to, because I don't know the context of the person asking this, I'm going to lean more towards the small to mid-size data center operator as opposed to like someone that works for Digital Realty or Equinix or NTT Global Data Centers or something, where you have just such an amazing global brand that your sales reps have different challenges. So for a small to mid-size colocation operator, the playbook that I usually recommend is leaning heavily into events. And when I suggest that, usually people's first reaction is, oh, well, we're all set. We go to tons of events. We go to every event. We attend. We have exhibits and everything like that. And sometimes we even speak at those events. And those events can be good, but they may not be nearly as direct or nearly as precise as you're looking for to get directly to your ideal clients, to your addressable market. For starters, what I'd recommend is if your company has a very large percentage of its annual sales and marketing budget committed to large national and global conferences, I'd recommend as you renew these commitments for next year and the following year, as you're renewing those, that you do a quick little audit. And the first step that I'd recommend is on the left-hand side of the screen, get hold of their prospectus for this year, their media kit for this year, where they are talking about their anticipated demographics of who they think is going to attend this year. Then I'd look at the same information from last year. So basically they're declaring like who's going to be there at the event. Where are they from in terms of their locations? What kind of businesses do they represent? What company sizes are these? What certain industries, what job functions? Like 4 or 5 key demographics that give you an idea as to who has attended in the past and who they think will be attending in the future. So that's on the left-hand side of your screen. Then on the right-hand side of your screen, I want you to pull up your ideal client profile and your prioritized buyer personas. And your ideal client profile should be crystal clear, single one-pager that simply says like, this is geographically where these ideal clients are located. This is how big or how small their companies are. These are certain industries. that are a really good fit. These are certain industries that are a terrible fit. That's at the company or the account level. And then at the individual stakeholder level, your prioritized buyer persona. So within these accounts, who's the first most important, who's the second most important, perhaps there's a third most important category of economic stakeholder that you work with pre-sales and post-sales. And you typically would rank them based on economic or financial impact to your firm. And the most important we'd call the primary buyer persona. The second most important we call the secondary buyer persona. The third we call the tertiary buyer persona. And what I want you to do is to get self-aware about who your ideal clients are, who are the most important stakeholders that influence your relationships with these clients, and then look at how each and every one of these conferences that you attend, speak at, or sponsor at, how they help versus not help. Like, in other words, give each one a rating from 1 to 10, where 10 is a perfect fit. 1 is, wow, I didn't realize it was this bad. And most will likely be somewhere in the middle, where depending on how precise your ideal client profile is, how precise your buyer personas are, you'll likely discover that hopefully most of your existing investments are, for the most part, reasonably well aligned with your prioritized buyer personas and your prioritized ideal clients. If you find there's a terrible match and you feel like you're looking for a needle in a haystack, well, then you may want to take the bottom 20% of your investments and free them up to move to other places. So you're focused on investing your resources, just like what is the definition of an entrepreneur? Someone that moves resources from lower yield activities to higher yield activities. And what are some of these more higher yield activities? At the end of the day, for a co-location operator, for you to build a client list that really feeds the top and middle and bottom of your funnel, that lines up with your ideal clients, you're looking to spend time with prospects and future clients, educating and building trust with them. And the challenge at a lot of big events is, unless you're speaking and earned an editorial speaking slot, it can be challenging to find enough minutes, to find enough hours to be able to educate and build trust with your most important segments. When you're hosting your own events, it's quite different. And this is where a quality versus quantity kind of discussion really becomes super relevant. A lot of people get faked out like, but there's 3,000 people at this event. There's 5,000 people at this event. For sure, our ideal clients are there. They may be, and hopefully it's a significant percentage. But regardless, I'd encourage you to get very directional about where you're spending your time at this event. Because I know when you're hosting your own events to drive co-location pipeline, whether you're hosting your own in-person events or hosting your own events virtually, you would be very focused on only inviting the people that align up with your ideal client profile, that are from companies that are on your target account list, that line up perfectly or nearly perfectly with your ideal buyer persona. So the reality is, for a lot of co-location operators in their facilities, they likely have a conference room or a classroom or a foyer that can comfortably seat 10, 15, 20 people. All it takes is 15 or 20 of the right people, the correct people, the proper people, to be attending events in your own facility on a regular basis, and magical things can start to happen. The goal of all of this is educating and building trust. We now live in a world where the self-guided buyer's journey is the predominant buyer's journey, meaning that most of your prospects and clients are likely not going to be ready for a sales conversation until they're almost ready to buy. This is very different than 10 years ago. 10 years ago, it was common to find that most of your prospects and clients, highly technical, like IT professionals, facilities professionals, the typical buyers for various stakeholders for co-location, they'd get about halfway through their journey. At the time, it was 56% of the way through their journey. That was from CEB, the corporate executive board that's now owned by Gartner. And after that 56% point, they'd be open to spending the final 44% of the research and decision-making process with members of your sales team. That 56% number, wow, if only it was that easy. It's gotten way more challenging because most of your clients and prospects now are really, really sales allergic. 10 years of digital transformation, tens of millions of people working from home at the beginning of the 2020s, baby boomers starting to retire in large numbers, Gen Z and millennials getting into decision-making roles in large numbers. And we now have found that 56% number has jumped all the way to 83%, meaning 83% of researching, comparing options, and evaluating pricing now happens without you in the room. And wow, is this a big challenge for companies that are struggling to be able to educate and build trust with the ideal clients? Because even best case scenario, when they only get to you at that 83% point, best case scenario, you're only spending the final 17% of that buyer's journey with them. It's like, imagine that you were taking a bunch of clients or employees or channel partners to a sports event, like a football game or a tennis match or a baseball game or something like that. And for whatever reason, the people that you're invited are allowed in the stadium, in the arena at the beginning of the game, but they block your sales and marketing people from entering until the game is 3/4 of the way over, till it's 83% of the way over. You'd be like, wow, that's not, how would that ever happen? We're the ones who are spending the money to invite everyone. Well, they have a policy that they want to have a great spectator experience, a great fan experience. And they're afraid that becomes some salespeople can sometimes be a little over the top and obnoxious and pushy, and that would interfere with the fan experience. They have a sign posted next to we reserve the right to go through metal detector, no outside food or drinks, no selfie sticks, umbrellas, whatever. Like, they have all of these restrictions. And oh yeah, by the way, even if you're bought a corporate suite, no sales and marketing folks allowed in till the 8th inning, till the 4th quarter of the game. You'd be like, that's insane. But that's largely what's happening in the mind of your prospects and clients, is they only want to talk to you when they're almost ready to buy. So how do we earn our way in early and often? It's incredibly important to figure that out, to get to the right people in the right places at the right time, where you still have a chance to impact, to explain best practices, to indoctrinate your prospects and clients, to stack the decks in your favor, to make sure that you not only stay on the short list, but dramatically influence the criteria that they use to decide what they're going to do with their co-location digital infrastructure investment. So in order for us to be able to make that work, we need to get in there early and often, way before that 83% point. If you think about 28 touch points happening between complete stranger and prospect, our goal is to have as much surface area as possible in those 28 touch points as we possibly can, with the right people in the right companies. And the key with all of this, the key unlock with all of this, is to get you out of the vendor box and instead have your client-facing team members seen more like teachers, consultants, subject matter experts, trusted advisors, perhaps even thought leaders. And when you do this well, you turn the corner from being perceived as part of vendor research to being seen more like a part of their learning and development, their professional development process. And when you do this well, because you've taken the time to understand the biggest goals and challenges of each segment of those personas, and you're making all of your educational events all about what they care about, not what you care about, but what they care about, you're a lot more likely to find multiple people from the same company registering and attending together. And that's where the magic really starts to happen, because you're proactively driving alignments across multiple stakeholders, potentially multiple members of the decision committee during their formative stages of their research and decision-making process. If you think about how kids move, what's between childhood and adulthood, right? Adolescence, being a teenager. And oftentimes that phase of being a teenager, people call the formative years, right? So it's the same thing in the buyer's journey. If you think about adulthood as the decision stage, the bottom of the funnel, the end of the sales cycle, our goal is to get in during childhood and during the teenage years and adolescence, so we can really, really shape how they navigate all of the choices that are in front of them for what they're ultimately going to do with digital infrastructure. In order to do that, we can't have selfish asks. We can't talk about how wonderful we are and all our awards and all of our certifications. Early on, they just know that there's some goals that they're trying to figure out and some challenges that they're struggling with. And the better job you can do with inviting them to in-person events and virtual events that address their biggest goals and their biggest challenges in their own words, the more likely it is that they're going to RSVP, that they're going to register and attend and have a fantastic experience and want to bring their coworkers with them. And that's really, really where everything starts to come together. It's having multiple stakeholders from the same company attending your breakfast seminars, attending your lunch and learns, attending your webinars, and on a consistent basis. Remember I said early and often? The often part is incredibly important. This isn't one and done. There are some scenarios where co-location can be dramatically accelerated because their current option completely dropped the ball. But for the most part, it is a long game. We know co-location, it's quite common to find that companies are under like 24 or 36 month contracts. So we need to figure out a way to be in there early and often in a way that adds value to how they learn individually, as a team, and as a company. So again, so they see you as teachers, so they see you as subject matter experts, so you become a regular part of what they do for professional development and learning development. So if you think about your buyer persona research uncovering 5 or 6 biggest goals for each segment, 5 or 6 biggest challenges for each segment. So you have 10 or 12 topics there. And wow, put that in an educational events calendar, and you have 10 or 12 breakfast seminars to hold once a month over the next 10 or 12 months. And for people that can attend live that are within a 30 or 60 minute drive of your facility, you absolutely positively should implement this as an in-person event. The cool part is, compared to going to national and global conferences, it costs you pretty much nothing to run these events in your own facilities. As long as you have a good email list and you're doing your own outreach and email invitations and LinkedIn invitations and calls to invite people. Heck, you could even send nice printed invitations to make it look like a corporate event, a fancy corporate event that they get invited to. Again, cost of that relative to other things, virtually nothing. They come to your facility, you're not paying to rent your own conference room. So, okay, so you're bringing in a little bit of breakfast, or if it's a lunch and learn event, you're bringing in some sandwiches or pizza or whatever you're doing to feed and show a little bit of hospitality, compared to the cost of other events where you're looking for a needle in a haystack. You can literally run these grassroots events for, in the US, $500 to $1,500 per event. Divide by the number of people from your target accounts, from your ideal clients that are in the room, and you realize that, oh my gosh, I can't believe we're not already doing this. And this is exactly what I tell co-location operators. So if you have 3 or 4 buyer personas, maybe one is an IT executive from a mid-market company in the local region, maybe another one is a VC-backed tech founder or something like that. Maybe the third one is a managed service provider. Each will have different goals and different challenges that they're working on for their business. So I'd encourage you, if you have that fantastic little space with a TV on the wall that has a little credenza where you can put some food and comfortable seating for 10, 15, 20 people, week 1 of the month, every month like clockwork, is for your primary buyer persona. Week 2 of the month, like clockwork, is for your secondary buyer persona. Week 3 of the month, for your tertiary buyer persona. Set this up so there's 15, 20 minutes when they arrive to check in and have some food and chat with each other and network a little bit. Have 30 or 40 minutes of the actual content that you're focusing on, 10, 15, 20 minutes of informal Q&A, and then for anyone that wants to, take them on a tour around your facility. And literally, I don't want to overcomplicate it, but it actually is that simple. I don't know why every co-location operator on the planet isn't doing this as a collab between their account executives and sales developments and marketing folks. Again, it takes a little bit of time to get a program like this up and running, but you have the undivided attention of your perfect ideal prospects from your named accounts for anywhere from 45 minutes to an hour and a half, 10 or 12 times a year. You're not getting that at a conference. You'd be lucky if you end up with a 50% match between your ideal clients and their demographics. And unless you're one of the chosen 2% that's a speaker at an event, you're probably doing more schmoozing and having drinks and playing golf than actually educating and building trust. And again, if you're speaking, if you're in that 2%, or someone from your company is in that 2%, And by 2%, what do I mean? There's 2,500 people attending a conference and there's 50 speakers. That's the 2%. And maybe it's 5% altogether because the speakers are usually coming with a couple of coworkers. If you're in that 2% or that 5%, for sure, you're educating and building trust at that conference. And assuming that there's a relatively good match between your ideal clients and your prioritized buyer personas, keep doing that all day long. But if there's not a good match and you're not getting those opportunities to educate and build trust, you need a way to educate and build trust. If your ideal clients, if your prospects on these target account lists are within a 30 to 60-minute drive of your location, absolutely positively invite them early and often, over and over and over again, to these fantastic educational events. If it's not easy for them to drive to your location, then basically take the same deck, take the same content, and run it as webinars. And in both scenarios, both the in-person events and the webinars, of course, record it, because for every one person that attends or 10 people that attend, there's 5 or 10x that or more that should have attended that simply didn't. Coworkers of people that attended, people that had scheduling conflicts, people that were on vacation, people that were running around to dozens of data center related conferences all over the globe, and yet still want to learn from your educational events and resources. So for a co-location data center that wants to improve its client acquisition, I want to help you get out of the vendor box and stay out of the vendor box. I need to help you differentiate yourself so you're not just competing on price. So you're not seen as a commodity broker. I've seen this movie play out 10 years ago with web hosting companies. I've seen this movie play out with managed service providers. I want to make sure as a co-location operator that you're selling more than co-working for servers. Let that sink in for a minute. Co-working spaces, for people that don't want full-time offices, for a lot of companies that are just selling commoditized real estate and really don't do a lot with IT services or managed services, essentially they're selling co-working membership for services. I want to help you move up market. And a big part of moving up market is changing how your client-facing team members are perceived. So your more senior members on your team look a lot like the skill set of a fractional CTO. And the cool part is when you have that skill set, all of a sudden, the IT professionals of yours that are prospects and clients want to spend time with your team members because they're learning a ton from them, because they see your team members as their peers as opposed to just a pushy salesperson. So for a co-location data center operator that is looking to improve its client acquisition, lean heavily into understanding the self-driven buyer's journey. Think about how your client-facing team members can change how they're positioned to their prospects and clients, and think about what your tactical playbook and investment and commitment level looks like to get in early and often, early in the journey, throughout the journey, so you can dramatically influence the criteria that your prospects and clients use to evaluate all of the different options that are in front of them for co-location digital infrastructure. So that's how to improve co-location data center client acquisition. If you're getting good value from this week's Data Center Go-to-Market Sales and Marketing Q&A show, make sure that you hit the like button to help spread the love. Help spread the word. If you have an idea for a topic or a question or a challenge that you think we should address in an upcoming show, be sure to leave that in the comments on whatever platform that you're watching on. So what is up next? How does a data center technology and consulting firm improve sales to the blockchain industry? How does a professional services firm, a data center technology and consulting firm, improve its sales to the blockchain industry? That is a terrific question and brings together actually a couple of LinkedIn profile stops of my own, where you're kind of intersecting fintech with infrastructure as services. So your team members, probably your executive team, is bringing significant industry-specific experience that's directly beneficial to technology providers, software developers, infrastructure providers, other expertise that is focused on blockchain and how it's dramatically influencing how transactions take place between parties. What do we call that? Decentralization. There's a whole bunch of related jargon and buzzwords in and around that world. But if you have that deep expertise, it's incredibly important that you lead with that front and center. So for a company that is in the business of providing technology, more than likely some kind of digital infrastructure in some kind of co-location or edge or some kind of data center operator scenario or cloud scenario, plus consulting on how to better tap into all of that. Let's start with the basics here is let's make sure your ideal client profile is in good shape. So in order to make sure that we're focusing on the right kinds of companies, what I want you to do is to look at where you've had the most success in the past with these blockchain related clients. And for most companies, you likely have some clues about this sitting right on your website. So we can look at your case studies, your reviews, your testimonials, your logos. And from that, we're looking to get a consensus on who these blockchain companies actually are. And if there's no clues about that in public facing website, social kind of properties, then the next thing you would do is look into your CRM, your customer relationship management system, perhaps talk to your sales leadership, certainly talk to your finance leadership, your CFO, and who are the most profitable blockchain related clients, who spends the most with us, who's generated the most revenue, who's the most profitable, who has the best unit economics, who has the most lifetime value at a modest client acquisition cost, who has a relatively manageable sales cycle length, who doesn't pose any kind of credit risk. Talk to the operations support folks on your team, your account managers. Who are the clients that they enjoy working with the most? Who has the highest net promoter score? All of this taken together into account should give you an idea of who these ideal clients are. So this is your simple one-page ICP, Ideal Client Profile 101. So geographically, where are these clients located? Can you truly sell technology and consulting to blockchain clients globally? Or do you need to focus on one region of the world, one continent at a time? Or maybe it's a cluster of countries or just one country at a time. A lot will depend in some of these categories as to whether you're regulated, you're in a country or location where there's regulation around who can provide this kind of support, what kind of compliance, what kind of accreditation, what kind of certifications are required to do these FinOps related kind of consulting engagements to provide this kind of infrastructure. So there's the geographic part of your ideal client profile. And then there's the company size. And this is the big one too. Both on the infrastructure side and on the fintech side, there's very much a Goldilocks scenario that happens with trying to find the ideal clients. If the clients are too small, they may not be able to afford your technology. They may not be able to afford your consulting services. So there generally is a pretty well pinpointable, very well-defined floor minimum size that they need to be able to afford your minimum level of engagement, your least expensive offering. At the upper end of the range, this is a big issue as well with blockchain, with fintech, with digital infrastructure. At what point would a client be so large that they're far more likely to do this in-house? Or even if they're not doing this in-house, where they want a much larger enterprise kind of technology and consulting firm. So if you work for like a big four firm like KPMG or EY or PwC or Deloitte or something like that, for sure you check that box. And it's possible for this category that Fortune 500, Fortune 1000, kind of even Fortune 5000 companies may strongly prefer what they perceive to be a larger, safer brand, a huge company hiring a huge company. When that comes up, it's important for you to not overinvest your lead generation, your nurturing, your education and trust building with companies where you're going to get knocked out, not just by size, but because they have very specific requirements around surety bonds, around compliance, around financial reserves, around looking at your P&L. Those are all those are definitely issues that tend to come up from time to time. So it's important to know at the upper size where you're likely to not have a lot of success either. So for a lot of companies in the space, maybe you're selling to a client that is anywhere from 50 to 5,000 employees, which should give you a nice size universe. And of course, that's going to depend on whether you're just doing business in one particular country or several countries or a continent or even globally. But so get dialed into the size that's a good fit, and then get dialed into industries that are a particularly good fit. Now, you're mentioning this here as the blockchain industry. That said, it's likely that you're selling these blockchain engagements to companies in specific industries that are developing infrastructure to do business on the blockchain. So with that in mind, when we look at your founders' backgrounds, when we look at your CVs, your resumes, your LinkedIn profiles, where do you tend to have the deepest experience? And in a lot of geographic regions, this will also align with where you have the ability to legally do business in this particular category in these particular regions. So for companies that specialize in data center technology and consulting for blockchain, maybe, for example, you have a lot of deep expertise in SaaS, in telecommunications, in manufacturing, and e-commerce. So there's 3 or 4 verticals there. Make sure that those are listed in your ideal client profile, because for sure that's going to influence your content strategy, your event strategy, your targeting with outbound, the drop-down lists that you have on your lead generation forms, the website navigation, various website pages. You certainly would want to have a page for each of those 4 segments, and then how you do your filtering and your qualification and segmentation within your CRM for how those leads get routed. It's increasingly common in data centers, digital infrastructure, and critical facilities, actually just in technology in general, to find companies that are segmenting their sales teams by vertical. It just gives you so much more leverage. You're able to operate as a trusted advisor, a true consultant for your clients. So in those 4 verticals, it's very common that you'd have a partner that's assigned to develop business and manage engagements in each of those 4 segments. What do we say? SaaS, telecommunications, e-commerce, and manufacturing. So your prospects and clients have a strong reason for wanting to engage with that member of your sales team, and they become more and more valuable over time with being able to deliver unique insights that can help them better do their job, because their job functions in a similar size company in a similar geographic region are you're sharing basically best practices that work across the board for a very specific persona and a very specific ICP who's interested in doing a lot more with blockchain. So with all of that in mind, so you have your ICP nailed down, you know geographically where they're located, how big or small their companies are, you know what industries are a great fit, what industries are a terrible fit. That again makes a huge difference with your targeting. From there, you can build out your target account list. People often call this account-based marketing, ABM, or account-based selling. This is a defined list of, it could be as few as a couple dozen companies. It could be as many as thousands of companies. Usually it's a few hundred companies that fit that ICP perfectly, that fit that ideal client profile that you'd love to be doing business with. So they'd be contracting with you for your data center technology and consulting services. So that's at the company level or the account level. Then within those accounts, all of the education and trust building needs to be done with people, with individuals. And the most important kind of stakeholder in each of those accounts, we're going to call the primary buyer persona. The second most important kind of stakeholder in those kind of accounts, we're going to call the secondary. And maybe there's even a tertiary buyer persona for who has the biggest economic impact on that client relationship, on that engagement. And depending on how big or small they are, it's likely in huge companies that you'll have much more granular job functions. And in smaller companies, you'll have one person wearing a lot of different hats. If you're selling to enterprises, you're very likely going to find that there's literally people on their payroll showing up in LinkedIn Sales Navigator who literally have the word blockchain in their job title. And there's other leading indicators that show that they're very specialized in blockchain. Like when you look at their skills endorsements on their LinkedIn profile, there's dozens of people that have endorsed them for having skills and expertise around blockchain. When you look at the groups they belong to, there's a whole bunch of different LinkedIn groups. When you look at their recent activity, again, it's talking about blockchain, and everything related to decentralized and all of the other related fields that show you that this person is really, really into managing this kind of technology initiative, business initiative for their companies. So once you figure out who those 2 or 3 most important segments are within those companies, then you're going to do your homework and figure out what's going on in their world, what's top of mind for each of them. Their 5 or 6 biggest goals, their 5 or 6 biggest challenges in their own words. And once you know that information, that should dramatically impact everything that you do that's about attracting and engaging with those kinds of prospects and clients. In other words, before you do your website copywriting for your page, that's for the CFO of a mid-market manufacturing company who wants to get into blockchain. You need those customer insights. Otherwise, you're just guessing at the words that are top of mind for them for their goals and challenges. We don't want to guess. We want to know the reality and use that for your website copywriting, use that for your product marketing materials, use that for your sales enablement, your social schedule, your email marketing program, your paid ads, and certainly your event strategy. And as with all parts of data centers, digital infrastructure, and critical facilities, the goal is to get in as early as possible in their journey so you can shape the criteria that they use to navigate your category of data center technology and consulting that's directly related to blockchain. So once you know those 5 or 10 biggest goals and challenges, those are the 5 or 10 topics to cover at your Lunch and Learn series, at your webinar series over the next 10 or 12 months that motivates those folks that are saying, wow, like, how did they know this was such a big deal for us? This is exactly what we're struggling with. This is exactly what I'm trying to figure out. This is exactly what my team is working on. So not only will I be there, I'm going to accept their recommendation and bring 2 or 3 of my coworkers along with me to learn together, because teams that learn together grow together, and you're proactively driving alignment in the early stages of the journey, which dramatically tips the scales in favor of your company. I mean, if you look at a lot of what an account executive does in a self-driven journey, is they're supporting their internal champion to help drive alignment across that internal champion's team and other relevant teams within the company. So what could be better than starting that in the even earlier stages of the journey, in those formative stages, where you can really stack the decks in your favor by introducing those prospects and future clients to your methodologies and best practices for everything that's directly related to blockchain, data center technology, and data center consulting. So in terms of improving sales, a lot of this comes down to having your prospects and clients perceive your salespeople to be experts. And they should be experts. This changes the nature of how you hire. This changes the nature of what reskilling, upskilling, cross-training all looks like. So your account executives, your sales development reps, business development reps are seen as legit teachers and consultants and trusted advisors and subject matter experts by your prospects and clients. Because when that happens, they're a lot more receptive to attending your events and learning from these client-facing team members. When you do this early and often, it dramatically improves both the quality and quantity of your pipeline. So that if you're looking to improve sales to the blockchain industry, you're getting introduced to basically the decision committee or people that work with folks that are on the decision committee. So by the time they get to the decision stage, you already have multiple fans, multiple advocates for you in that particular company. And wow, does that change the nature of the quality of the conversations that you have when they're finally in market for your category of products and services. So again, think of 28 touch points between complete stranger and purchase decision. We want surface area in as many of those touch points as possible. And the best way to consistently do this is to really understand the biggest goals and challenges for those 2 or 3 most important segments and have a personalized event strategy for each one of those segments that gets you in early and often. From a tactical perspective, what does this look like? In-person events, webinars, live and on demand, fully supported by an email marketing program, drip, nurturing, email newsletters, video-based content, all of the above. At the end of the day, We want you to be part of their professional development and learning and development process. And to the extent that in the blockchain, that some of the buyer personas will be financial technologists, one thing that may motivate them even more is if you have the ability in your educational events to grant CPE, continuing professional education credits. Because, like, for example, in the US, CPAs, certified public accountants, pretty sure this is still the case, have to do 40 hours a year of continuing professional education. So if you're hosting a lunch and learn series or a webinar series that's an hour a month for 12 months, you literally could be just 12 out of 40, 30%, 40% of their 30%, right? Yeah, 12 out of 40. 30% of their annual CPE they're getting just from attending your educational webinar series, educational lunch and learn breakfast seminar series to learn about blockchain best practices for manufacturing, for SaaS, for telecommunications, for e-commerce, whatever it is that they do. And how do you know what to cover in each of those events? Buyer persona research 101. Don't guess, ask them, figure out what their biggest goals and what their biggest challenges are, and deliver a ton of value. If you have internal subject matter experts that can do this, fantastic. If you need to use a mix of internal and external subject matter experts where you're bringing in guest speakers, contractors of yours, channel partners of yours, yeah, absolutely. It can be your own speakers, or you can be curating, moderating, hosting, whatever you want to call it. But at the end of the day, we want to have fantastic world-class educational events experiences with the primary, secondary, tertiary buyer personas. And these target accounts that perfectly align with our ideal client profile. So that's how a data center technology and consulting firm can improve sales to the blockchain industry. Is you want to make sure that your prospects and clients perceive your company to have some of the smartest people on the planet when it comes to anything and everything that's directly related to the intersection of blockchain and data center technology and data center consulting. The better job you do at this, the more sales opportunities you're going to generate, and the more great new clients you're going to close, retain, expand, and have fantastic results with, fantastic success with. So that's how a data center technology and consulting firm can improve sales to the blockchain industry. What do we got up next? How does a data center real estate, DCRE, tenant representative and strategic advisor qualify opportunities? How does a data center real estate tenant representative and strategic advisor qualify opportunities? That is a terrific question. And there's a couple of different ways to approach this. And I was actually having a conversation about this with someone on our podcast a couple of weeks back, Howie Berry from Avison Young in Silicon Valley. So there's a couple different ways to approach this from a digital marketing standpoint, and we'll link up to that episode as well of the podcast when it goes live. From a digital marketing and sales enablement perspective, as long as you're doing a good job with publishing and promoting downloadable content like state of data center real estate kind of reports and market update reports on specific prices and vacancy rates and all the other benchmarks that people would care about within real estate, you can certainly qualify by having drop-down lists on your lead generation form that help to gather the right information to know if this is a lead that should get passed immediately to sales, or if it should stay with marketing for a while to continue getting nurtured with email marketing and invited to events and things like that. So that's for sure something that you can do on the digital side. And you're generally doing that with educational content that lines up reasonably well for specific buyer personas, biggest goals and challenges. And this would be reflected on your website pages and your copywriting and your calls to action and your video content, your email content, your social content, your outbound, or all of the above. So you're essentially qualifying at the point of form fill or at the point of conversion. The other part of qualification with qualifying opportunities that's a lot more vigorous is they fill out that form and now it goes to a human and or potentially AI tools supplementing this, where you're actually doing due diligence on the tenants, where you're doing due diligence on their company, on their individual role within the company, on their actual requirements before you go and invest a lot of time in talking to them about specific property availability. So that's a skill set that typically someone that's an expert in data center real estate and that trains some junior members of their team to do that first level of qualification would do. And that's no different than anyone that's doing qualification in any kind of context like that. The reality is, one of the things I've observed over the years is it's reasonably fluid for people that sell co-location to go back and forth between selling co-location and working more on the real estate side. Because the reality is, depending on the size of your deals, depending on whether your employer is a small to mid-size operator, or whether it's a wholesale data center operator, wholesale data center developer, hyperscaler, whether your company is a lot more focused on selling space and power as opposed to selling IT services. There's a lot of variables that come into play, but there is a certain amount of transferable skill set between the sales professional, like an account executive or even a sales development or business development rep who works for a co-location operator, and someone that's working exclusively on the real estate side of the data center ecosystem, again, which is why you see people sometimes when they're leaving data center operators to go work for one of the bigger mid-size data center real estate players in the space. Just to review the ecosystem to make sure we're on the same page, we segment out the data center ecosystem into data center operators like co-location, hyperscale, edge, modular, and wholesale, recognizing some of them are more pure operators than others. Like a modular data center provider is more like a manufacturer many times than an operator, but similar enough to like edge and co-location that's the part of the ecosystem from a DCSMI perspective that where we classify them. So you have data center operators, you have data center technology related companies. We track 22 different companies in the space, like storage, cybersecurity, hardware, software, networking, cabling, connectivity. Then you have data center facilities related companies, power, cooling, physical security, commissioning, decommissioning. Then there's construction / real estate / investment. We consider construction and real estate and investment to be very, very closely joined at the hip. Why? Because they work together incredibly closely. And the reality is no major data center construction project isn't happening without a significant amount of capital. So investors are in early and often. And when it comes to marketing and selling the data center space that's available, real estate professionals need to be involved. So that's the fourth segment of the data center ecosystem: construction, real estate, and investment. And then the fifth segment we consider outsourced sales and marketing. And this is like marketing agencies, PR firms, sales brokers, manufacturers, reps, distributors. We consider recruiters part of outsourced sales and marketing. We consider training companies in many cases to be extensions of sales and marketing and evangelism and channel partner ecosystem. So there's the operators, the technologists, the facilities professionals, construction, real estate and investment, and outsourced sales and marketing. So for a data center real estate tenant representative and strategic advisor to qualify opportunities, a lot of the same skill sets that a SDR, a BDR, an AE, or an account manager for a data center operator would have is similar to this kind of skill set that a data center real estate person would have in a tenant representative, except for that you're talking about deal size many times. So a person that's selling co-location could be selling like, a rack or a cabinet at a time, things that are 4-figure, 5-figure kind of per month kind of sales. Whereas a data center real estate, the deals are typically 7-figure, 8-figure, 9-figure kind of deals. So it's an order of magnitude difference. Second is the colo sales professional may be focused on selling, depending on the sophistication level of their employer and their whole go-to-market play, but they may be selling something that's very commoditized, where they're having to compete against companies their size, companies a little bigger, a lot bigger, what have you. Whereas a data center real estate professional may have something that's considerably more scarce, where there's much fewer options. And those options are becoming increasingly scarce when we look at the power that's available, that lines up with like site selection criteria. So there are similarities, there definitely are differences, but some of the core skill set that's used for sales qualification for data center operators is reasonably transferable to doing this in a data center real estate context. One other footnote on all of this too, we actually do from time to time also see people that go back and forth between residential and commercial real estate, not just industrial, but residential and commercial real estate, and selling co-location. Like, for example, they leave a co-location operator that gets acquired, merges, whatever, has some kind of exit, and all of a sudden you look at their LinkedIn profile and they're selling homes, or they're selling office space or retail strip malls or something like that. So yeah, there's this whole back and forth between these career tracks. And to get deeper into what some of these specifics are for jumping between these, I guess what I'd call first or second cousin kind of fields, where there's some overlap a little bit between the skills and the experience and comp plans and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, qualifying the opportunities is really understanding who the best fits is for your individual spaces that you represent, especially as a tenant representative, what their requirements are, what the market looks like, if they have the resources to really be able to do this, if you're talking to the right person and this kind of account. And again, this is all going to be individualized, basically, depending on what your portfolio, what your listing portfolio looks like at any given time. So at the end of the day, for a data center real estate tenant representative and strategic advisor to better qualify opportunities, there's some surface level qualification that you'll be able to do just based on website lead generation and some of their interactions with your content and events. But in most cases, because these are huge deals and there's a lot of moving parts, a lot of complex interactions, a lot of different kinds of stakeholders that come up, more than likely this qualification is happening with a junior level person on the team before it's passed to a more senior level person on this team. It's kind of similar to the skill set that someone would have as like a sales development rep, an SDR or BDR, business development rep, and that first level of contact into that particular data center real estate firm. And this actually is a good enough question that the next time I have a DCRE person on the Data Center Go-to-Market podcast, we'll go into this a little bit deeper as well. But I know they invest a lot of resources in due diligence on both sides. So a lot of this in most cases is just making sure that once you get beyond the pleasantries and building a little bit of rapport and a quick 15-minute or 30-minute conversation before you get too deep, that their expectations are realistic, that you understand their deadline, that you're talking to the right person, you're talking to the right people on these accounts, and that they overall have general awareness of what's going on in the marketplace. In many cases, that general awareness you could be paving the way by having some fantastic content marketing educational resources on your website and infographics and downloadable content and events and webinars and everything like that to supplement better qualifying your opportunities. So that's the general playbook that I would recommend for a DCRE, for a data center real estate tenant representative and strategic advisor to better qualify their opportunities. If you're getting good value from this week's Data Center Go-to-Market Sales and Marketing Q&A show, make sure that you help spread the word by hitting the like button. And if you have an idea for a topic or a question or a challenge that you think we should address in an upcoming show, be sure to leave that in the comments on whatever platform you're watching, and we'll add that to the consideration queue. We're going to take a real quick break now for a message from our sponsor. When we come back, we'll tackle 3 more of the biggest sales and marketing challenges that we're hearing about throughout data centers, critical facilities, and digital infrastructure.
Data Center Go-to-Market Sales and Marketing Q&A is sponsored by DCSMI, elevating the role of sales marketing and go-to-market GTM professionals in the growth of the data center industry. To stay informed about upcoming episodes, subscribe to the Data Center Sales and Marketing newsletter on the DCSMI website at www.dcsmi.com. Again, that's www.dcsmi.com. Now, back to Data Center Go-to-Market Sales and Marketing Q&A.
Hey there, Joshua Feinberg from DCSMI, the Data Center Sales and Marketing Institute, and you're watching the Data Center Go-to-Market Sales and Marketing Q&A, our weekly live show where we tackle a handful of the biggest challenges that we're hearing about throughout data centers, digital infrastructure, and critical facilities. So what is up next? Our next question is, how do we attract data center clients for networking solutions, data management, and infrastructure? How do we attract networking solutions? How do we attract data center clients for networking solutions, data management, and infrastructure? That is a terrific question. And these are hot enough areas within the IT marketplace that these could potentially be three different kinds of businesses, where like a networking solutions company would be the first cousin of like a managed service provider, an MSP, or like a network integrator or IT consulting firm. That could be a standalone business. Data management is very similar to the kind of IT business that would work with like analytics, business intelligence, building AI, large language models, more on the development and data engineering side as opposed to on the networking infrastructure side. So you'd have like a lot of developers, project managers around developers and data engineering. And then infrastructure is more of a pure play as to what most people would associate with the data center industry. Infrastructure as a service, public cloud, private cloud, multi-cloud, co-location, hyperscale, edge, modular kinds of data centers. So your company is in all three of these areas. I should also add that infrastructure can actually have two different meanings in the data center ecosystem. For data center technology companies, that's what we were just referring to. But there's data center facilities related companies too, that when they talk about infrastructure, they're usually talking more about power and cooling infrastructure and maybe the outside of telecommunications coming into there. But usually they're talking, in this point in time in the world we live in today, infrastructure is code for power grid availability and how they're dealing with power grid or lack of power grid availability and alternative energy and things like that. It could also have something to do with like site selection and water availability and community relations and everything that goes into finding the right places to locate and invest in building out data center facilities. So your company is in all three of these areas: the networking solutions, data management, and because you're asking infrastructure in the same context as those previous two categories, we're going to assume that we're talking about technology infrastructure. So to find clients that need all three of these, the first question is, are you looking for magic clients that have a need for all three of these areas, or are you content? Are you satisfied if clients only buy one of those areas and may potentially have no opportunity to cross-sell or upsell or land and expand over time? So that's the first question. And with that in mind, what we're looking for essentially is where you've had the most success in the past, as long as this isn't a brand new startup. And if this is a brand new startup, I'd probably encourage you to pick one of those three areas and spend the first year or two building out deep expertise and a deep client list in one of those three distinct areas before you get into running essentially three businesses that are integrated in together, hopefully well integrated in together. So as long as your business is well established, you should have an idea of who your perfect clients are. These usually show up in your case studies, your testimonials, your references, and the logos on your website. For sure, there should be some clues about who your best clients are sitting in your CRM, your customer relationship management, and your finance and accounting software. You definitely can get some guidance from this from your company leadership, especially your sales leadership, especially your finance leadership, on the happiest, most profitable, most lucrative clients that you want more of. So with all of that in mind, that should allow you to back into documenting a simple ideal client profile. Like, where are these clients located? Do they need to have good proximity to where you're located, or can they be anywhere on the planet? And actually, in some of all three of these categories could be conducive to having a pretty big, if not global, at least significantly national, perhaps multinational kind of footprint. Networking usually, because it touches like cabling and connectivity and fiber, you would tend to need to have some presence either through assets, resources that you own, or through partnerships that align with what they specifically need. Data management typically can be done from anywhere on the planet to anywhere on the planet. So the great news is you can have clients anywhere. The bad news is you can have competitors anywhere. And then infrastructure, again, it really depends on whether they're looking for physical infrastructure relationships and more digital virtual infrastructure kind of relationships. If it's physical, like co-location, yeah, absolutely, positively, they're almost certainly going to pick co-location based on proximity. We know for decades there's been very, very strong bias among IT decision makers to pick co-location companies that have co-location facilities that are very, very close by to where they work and live, usually a matter of a few 5 or 10 miles, 5 or 10 kilometers, something like that. So that should help you get clarity on when you blend these three different businesses together and you blend your current portfolio of clients, how do you clone that portfolio of clients? So again, ICP 101 here, where are they located? How big or small are these clients? How big do they need to be to afford your minimums? The reality is usually when it comes to data management, there's so many great self-serve tools, and especially in the world of generative AI and agentic AI that exist out there, that if you're doing custom data management work, it usually signals that this is a pretty well-resourced company. How well-resourced do they need to be? Do they need to be 50 employees? Do they need to be 200 employees? Do they need to be 500 employees? How big do they need to be to essentially afford your minimums? And then at the other extreme, how big of a client can you actually handle? If we look at where you've been most successful, have you had success with Fortune 50 companies, Fortune 100 companies, Fortune 500, Fortune 1000, Fortune 5000, or do you start to top off and have significantly diminishing returns with clients that are bigger than, say, 5,000 employees, 10,000 employees? And again, there's nothing wrong with it. I'm just asking you to be self-aware about what should go in your ideal client profile, what should go in your targeting work based on where you've been most successful in the past. Kind of a quick back of the napkin on a company that would be successful selling to data center related clients for networking solutions and data management and data center infrastructure. It's maybe on the low end, these companies have 50 employees or 200 employees, and maybe at the upper end of the range, they could have 5 or 10,000 before their needs get so incredibly complex that it may not be a good fit for your company, assuming your company is relatively small. If you work for a company that's truly an enterprise itself, then maybe there are no limits and you truly can be a superstar in all three of these categories with the largest of large enterprise kinds of clients who need networking solutions, data management, and infrastructure. So that's the size part of the ideal client profile. And then there's the industry match. And when we look at these three categories here, especially data management, you're almost certainly going to run into issues around needing to have certain kinds of compliance, accreditations, certifications to be able to work with clients in certain niches. And again, depending on where they're located and depending on where you're located, it's very possible that clients in regulated industries like education, government, healthcare, financial services have specific compliance requirements that you need to meet to be able to do business in your region and with them in their particular region. And this is also where like governance and edge comes into play as well, where the data is physically located. And that's an issue because of tariffs, a privacy issue, of various kinds of regulatory issues. So all of this for sure should get factored into your ideal client profile for the intersection of both geography and the intersection of industry match, because you don't want to spend a lot of sales and marketing resources, digital resources, building pipeline with clients that you can't actually help. So let's focus on being very specific about the industries that are a great fit and the industries where it's basically an instant disqualification. And it's very possible that the data management part of your business may be one of the more limiting factors here. So your ideal client profile is now you figured out where they're located, how big or small their companies are, what industries are a great fit. That'll help you build out your target account list, a couple dozen, maybe a few hundred, in some cases a few thousand potential kinds of companies. How you dole that out among your sales team is up to you, but increasingly the trend we're seeing is segmenting sales professionals by industry verticals that they specialize in. So they have a lot more leverage with the prospects and clients and can operate more like consultants and trusted advisors as opposed to their traditional like account executive, sales development rep kind of titles. So you have your ideal client profile, you have your target account list, and then we need to know about the people in these accounts where we need to build deep relationships with. And the most important stakeholder, that's going to be your primary buyer persona. The second most important stakeholder, secondary. If there's a third, that's a tertiary buyer persona. And where this gets a little interesting and a little bit complex is it's entirely possible that this gets it to the heart of product market fit. Product market fit is the degree to which you know exactly who your ideal clients are, exactly the products and services they purchase from you, the price points that they purchase those products and services at, how often they purchase, or how long the durations are, and all the other basic unit economics that come with having pattern recognition, muscle memory for doing business a lot of times with a specific client with a specific kind of product and service. And the reason that product market fit and ideal client profiles are incredibly important is in larger companies, it's very possible that you're dealing with different stakeholders in each of these three categories. In data center infrastructure, in networking solutions, those may be a little more closely related, but for sure in larger companies, data management is a whole separate set of stakeholders, whole separate set of teams. So depending on how big or small your clients are, this is going to dictate how you go about segmenting your persona, segmenting the most important people that you need to be building relationships with that can have the most important, second most important impact, third most important economic or financial impact on those relationships. Because in order for you to have, and it depends on your size and their size as well. In a small to mid-sized company, all three of these categories are going to roll up to your chief technology officer or chief information officer or VP of IT or something like that, or SVP, EVP of IT. In larger companies, there's going to be a lot more segregation. So this will dictate how you do your segmentation strategy, which dramatically impacts how you address your buyer personas and website and digital marketing and sales enablement and email marketing and ads, digital ads, and your event strategy and conference investments and channel partnerships. So again, everything really needs to line up in your go-to-market playbook to make this work well, but it starts with having strong recognition for where you've been most successful. And then looking for ways to clone that by getting really tight around that ideal client profile, really tight around that target account list, and really tight around a strong understanding of how you're going to segment the different stakeholders that are in those accounts to really dig deeply on providing a ton of educational value, professional development, learning and development kind of value that's anchored to the biggest goals and challenges that you consistently hear from each one of those segments, one segment at a time. Like, for example, if you are selling to a director of network engineering, if you're selling to a VP of infrastructure, if you're selling to a chief data officer, I can assure you that in at least 2 out of 3 of those segments, perhaps all 3 of those segments, that they are going to have different professional goals that they're working on individually, goals that their team is working on, and how that rolls up into their company. And they're also going to have different frustrations. And if you try to talk to the chief data officer or chief analytics officer using the same language that you would talk to with someone that is a network operations center manager, it's not going to resonate. So you can't be lazy with this. If we really want to compete, we need to get very specific about who they are and what they care about at the intersection of their data center related services and products that they need from a company like yours. So if we're looking to attract them, now that we know their goals and challenges, segment by segment, we're going to build website pages and video content and lead generation premium content and blogs and podcasts and in-person events and webinars that help them do their job better. And ultimately, at some point, that needs to align with your company's commercial interests, but especially in the awareness and the consideration stages and the early and middle stages of the buyer's journey. It's very possible that they're leading indicators that they're going to be in market for your kinds of products and services in the coming weeks and the coming months may not have the immediate line of sight that you'd like to have if you're looking for immediate return on investment on that relationship. But if we wait until they are in market and ready for a sales conversation, they'll be almost ready to buy. And the problem is if we only meet them when they're almost ready to buy, you'd be like, wow, that's awesome. They're almost ready to buy. No, it actually sucks in most cases, because what that means is we had no influence whatsoever on the criteria that they're using to navigate your category. It is incredibly important that we have a large amount of surface area, that we have a lot of interactions with these prospects and clients throughout the awareness and the consideration stages and the early and middle stages of their buyer's journey. And in most cases, the most effective way to do this is through events. Not necessarily booths at other people's events, not necessarily sponsoring other people's events, but educational events where we can make a significant dent on shaping how they view your category. In other words, we want to insert ourselves into those buyer personas, professional development and learning and development that they spend time on a consistent basis to level up on what they need to do their job better, to solve some of their biggest goals that show up in their job descriptions and their OKRs, their objectives and key results, that are frustrating them to no end, that are messing with their work-life balance, that could be causing mental health problems, job insecurity problems, a whole host of bad things that are stressing them out and driving them nuts. To the extent that you can show up with educational events and resources that help them navigate these based on how other stakeholders in similar companies and similar kind of job functions are addressing these issues today, you can end up really being a superhero. And that's what we're looking for. We're looking to get you out of the vendor box. We're looking for your sales professionals, your account executives, your sales developers, your marketers, your account managers to be seen more like teachers, consultants, subject matter experts, trusted advisors, maybe even thought leaders when it comes to anything and everything directly related to networking solutions, data management, and infrastructure, technology infrastructure. And the better job you can do with earning your way in early and often, the more likely you're going to indoctrinate, stack the decks, introduce them to your methodologies and best practices, proactively drive alignment across multiple stakeholders from that same company in the formative stages of their research and decision-making process. All of those can have an amazing, amazing impact on generating pipeline, accelerating pipeline, and helping you get ideal clients that have a very smooth, frictionless sales process, that onboard, that go through all of the critical account management, client success phases with initial value, intended value, and extended value, that are super receptive to account expansion over time, becoming promoters, having great NPS, that love what you're doing. And a lot of this starts by setting the foundation the right way of getting your company out of the vendor box and seeing more like true experts. And a lot of that expertise gets anchored to deeply horizontal or deeply vertical expertise to help them cut through the noise to make your company and your client-facing team members truly differentiate and stand out in crowded marketplaces. And like I mentioned, in those three categories, networking solutions, data management, and infrastructure, data management for sure can be delivered from nearly anywhere on the planet. And because of that, you can have clients conceivably anywhere on the planet, as long as there's not compliance or certification or legal issues that you can't navigate. But you also are introducing competitors from anywhere on the planet. So that's where it's incredibly important to have education and trust building as a core part of your go-to-market. That's where it's incredibly important to segment your expertise by their niche, their vertical, their industry, what they do, so you can really, really stand out as an expert as opposed to a jack of all trades. So at the end of the day, that's how I would approach how to attract data center clients that have a current or near future need for networking solutions, data management, and data center infrastructure. Okay, what do we have up next? By the way, if you're getting good value from this week's Data Center Go-to-Market Sales and Marketing Q&A show, make sure that you help spread the word by hitting the like button. And if you have an idea for a topic or a question or a challenge that you'd like to see us address potentially in an upcoming episode, make sure to leave that in the comments on whatever platform you're watching on, and we will add that to the consideration queue for an upcoming episode. So what do we have up next? Next question is about another category of data center operators, one that actually is a lot less hands-on in data center operation because they more closely align with like a data center developer. And that's wholesale data center providers, wholesale data center operators. And in particular, how can wholesale data centers attract and win new clients? How can wholesale data centers attract and win new clients? This is a terrific question because approaching this with the right mindset first requires understanding just how different the go-to-market for wholesale is compared typically to co-location, especially retail co-location. Typically with retail co-location, your sales professionals are working on small to mid-sized deals. And for most geographic markets, in most of the major developing markets, they're typically selling 4-figure, 5-figure, sometimes 6-figure annual engagements or your local currency equivalent. So what that means is you're looking for sales professionals that are comfortable selling to small to mid-sized companies. Usually they're not selling co-location specifically to enterprises. They can in some cases, but usually enterprises are looking for much bigger spaces. They're looking for wholesale data centers. They're looking for hyperscale category capacity. So it's a different mindset. This is something that the technology industry and SaaS in particular figured out about 10 years ago, is that in addition to segmenting your sales team by vertical expertise, by industry expertise, you typically are looking for sales professionals that have experience with certain deal sizes, because it takes a different kind of person to be able to sell a high volume of low dollar value, low tickets co-location deals or data center deals compared to selling into the mid-market, compared to selling in the enterprise. Enterprise can have an extremely long sales cycle. They can literally have dozens of different people that are involved in these conversations, way more complex than a small to mid-sized business, and requires a lot more deep expertise in many different areas than someone who's just selling a more productized service, a more commoditized kind of offering. And at the extreme version of the commoditized offering, we see some data center operators, especially like in the bare metal category, where their entry-level offering has gotten so commoditized that they have parted ways with having internal inside sales teams selling these offerings, and instead make these available for self-service sign up and self-service onboarding. So their clients are essentially buying those entry-level co-location offerings more like they would purchase e-commerce. It's got to be very light touch, simply because the purchase commitments on the part of their clients are so inexpensive that they really can't afford to fund sales compensation anymore to support that. So in some cases, it's moving to e-commerce. In some cases, they're allowing that as an opportunity for channel partners, like managed service providers, master agents, folks like that. But the reality is there's been a day of reckoning on the commoditized part of co-location in recent months and in the past year. And it doesn't surprise me that this has happened, because we saw the same thing happening with web hosting about 10 years ago. We see certain pockets of the managed service provider space that people have figured out it's not really viable to offer it without extreme amounts of self-service and self-onboarding, because the human labor on it is just too expensive relative to the average deal size. Now, wholesale data centers are at the other extreme. This is where basically you get a data center developer who builds sometimes known as like a powered shell. It's a building and there's nothing really inside of it. And it's up to the anchor tenant, whoever rents that huge space, to fill it as they see as they wish. So with a co-location operator, typically the racks, the cabinets, a lot of the telecommunications and networking infrastructure is already in place, and you're paying significant amounts of premium for access to that kind of infrastructure, for access to that kind of support and resources. Wholesale data center clients don't need that. They actually want the opposite. They want flexibility to build it as they want, to have a lot more impact as to what's actually going in the facilities. And because of that, it's a completely different deal. The deal is for wholesale data centers looks a lot more like selling real estate, renting real estate, than selling IT services. And that's the key with all of this, is that wholesale data center developers are most likely to use a hybrid approach, where they're hiring their own team members, as well as also working with data center real estate brokers, because of the nature of how big these deals are. And by deal size, these are easily 7-figure, sometimes 8-figure, sometimes even more than that. Just to put this in context, a little bit adjacent to wholesale data centers, but kind of in the same ballpark. We usually try to keep this content as evergreen as possible, but Oracle just very recently had an announcement where they signed a $30 billion US $30 billion annual client. They didn't disclose who that client is yet, but just to give you context on how big some of these huge deals are. And again, that's in cloud infrastructure as opposed to a wholesale data center, but some of these deals can be really, really massive. It's not likely that your company is selling billion-dollar deals, but it is very likely that wholesale data center transactions are routinely in the millions or tens of millions on a regular basis. So it's a completely different skill set. It's a completely different kind of go-to-market. The great news is you can largely throw the kitchen sink at what you're doing for go-to-market and sales and marketing. You can afford to do a lot of things for marketing and selling wholesale data center space that just simply aren't profitable to do in commoditized colocation. And this is where marketing and selling wholesale data center space becomes kind of similar to like a hyperscale data center provider. And there's a lot of gray areas as to how companies actually brand and position the two, but they're huge deals, much smaller number of potential tenants. And because of that, it's a very, very different kind of playbook. It's a very different kind of HR recruiting talent acquisition kind of process, because there's fewer people that actually have that experience that can do that successfully. There's certainly a lot more at stake. So when it comes to attracting and winning new clients, I'm especially partial to really dialing in who those ideal clients are, really, really partial to having a defined list of target clients. What many people would call like account-based marketing, ABM, or account-based selling. For wholesale data centers in a specific location, there may only be a couple dozen or maybe 100 or 200 potential clients, period. And that's taking into account that you could have tenants taking that space who are way outside of your geographic area. I mean, the reality is, depending on how big your space is, if you're trying to get one single tenant that takes the entire space versus an anchor tenant who takes a significant space and then is used as bait for the smaller tenants, depending on how big the space is, that can really, really limit how many companies potentially have the resources, the need, the budget to be able to do that. So that fuels how deep, how big or how small your target account list, and then who the stakeholders are within these accounts. And that's where the more sophisticated level of talent among your marketers, among your salespeople, become an even bigger issue. Because if you're selling these huge deals and you're selling to like huge hyperscalers, if you're like selling directly to Meta or Microsoft, or you're selling to Google, or you're selling to AWS in addition to their own facilities, if you're selling to like Apple or Netflix or massive hyperscale kind of buyers, it is a very, very, very different sales process than selling colocation space to a small to mid-sized business. And because of that, it's a much shorter list of talent who actually has that unique experience. And you're investing a lot more in them. You're investing a lot more in events. You're investing a lot more in demand generation. You're investing a lot more in the sales comp across the board to be able to do that. So it becomes a recruiting challenge as well. What's interesting as well is I've noticed over the last year or two that it's increasingly rare to find data center operators going to recruiting firms for filling marketing and sales jobs for most of their talent. Mostly because I guess the mindset is, if you're a good enough marketer, if you're a good enough sales professional, you should be able to market and sell yourself into recruiting kinds of contexts. And there's some validity to that and some lack of validity into that. When it comes to wholesale data centers, because the supply demand, the talent is so scarce to people that can actually do this, then yeah, there's definitely a context where we're actively spending significant amounts of time finding the right people, which in many cases, as sad as it is to say, it often involves poaching people from other companies that already have the similar experience. And this is one of these cynical Joshua Feinberg moments, but I felt for a long time that 10% of the people that are going to data center conferences are going to conferences because they're exploring their next opportunity or looking to pick people for their next opening. Again, it's going to sound really cynical, maybe even a little bit paranoid to be able to say it, but yeah, I think there is a significant amount of people anecdotally that are going to conferences looking for their next job or looking for their next talent. So whatever is on the agenda for speaking, completely irrelevant to that kind of attendee. Whatever is sitting in the expo hall, completely irrelevant to that attendee. That kind of attendee, they have a completely different agenda where they're looking for career development and recruiting to happen against the backdrop of that gathered group. So anyway, when it comes to attracting and winning new clients, it's awareness. the most basic level. There's the putting the shovel in the dirt ceremony, often accompanied by having a tent there and inviting some VIPs and other folks to come out and take some pictures and spread awareness. And then there's a matter of consistently getting the right people to be aware that this space exists. So it's awesome for account-based marketing. It's awesome for outbound, for outreach by phones, by email, by figuring out who has the biggest need for this in the space. But the strange part is you get to bigger and bigger spaces that you're looking for one tenant to take the entire space. Actually, the list collapses pretty quickly as to the companies that can actually afford it in a given region. So there's a lot to be said for hiring the kind of talent that has experience marketing and selling those kind of huge spaces to those specific few dozen kinds of accounts. Because just purely navigating the internal stakeholders is a job just in and of itself. We've said for a while that in the technology space, the future of being like an account executive looks a lot more like being a project manager for helping you to support your internal champion, driving internal alignment. There's an extreme version that goes on like that in the case of someone who is responsible for marketing and selling wholesale data center space for attracting and winning new clients. So that's my general guidance to be thinking about. Yeah, for sure, there are some people that can successfully upscale, level up on their career progression, who have sold mid-market and enterprise co-location deals that could be well suited to move into marketing and selling and attracting and winning new clients for wholesale data center space. But I think the most transferable skills are probably back and forth between selling wholesale and selling hyperscale, and those two different kinds of operator categories with quotes around operators within the data center ecosystem. So that's how wholesale data centers can attract and win new clients. That brings us to our final question that we're going to be addressing in this week's Data Center Go-to-Market Sales and Marketing Q&A show, which is, okay, the final question for this week is, how does a data center and cloud services marketplace business improve SEO, improve search engine optimization? How does a company that is a data center marketplace and cloud services marketplace improve their search engine optimization? This is a fantastic question, and it's extremely timely, because the bizarre irony is that so much of the growth, like NVIDIA-powered growth, Jensen Huang evangelized kind of growth with generative AI in the last couple of years, is happening as a byproduct of traditional search engine optimization being completely obsoleted. And what do I mean by that? Well, when you think about 5 or 10 years ago, when you were doing a search for information, either for work or for your personal life outside of work, more than likely you went to Google or Bing, a traditional search engine, and you did a search for, like, I don't know, best restaurants to entertain clients at in downtown Los Angeles or London or Singapore or whatever. And you got your 10 blue results, and you clicked through and you read reviews, and some of them could have been restaurant websites. Some of them could have been places like OpenTable and Facebook reviews and other kinds of things. But you went to a search engine to start the search. Increasingly, what we're seeing is that one is Google itself, as is Bing, is displaying this information without having to click through to anything. That's a big, big change. In the case of Google, they call this AI Essentials. And it's new, but it's not new. What do I mean by that? Well, I'll give you a perfect example. I'm a baseball fan. In the US, it's a pretty big, widely followed professional sport. There may be professional sports in your area, or this applies equally to figuring out the weather or even booking an airline flight. And there was a time in the early 2000s where if I wanted to see how a team did in the game that they played last evening, I would either go to Google and from Google navigate to that team's website, or I'd go directly to that team's website to find out the final score. So, like, for example, if the Los Angeles Dodgers were playing the New York Mets 10, 15 years ago, if I wanted to know that score, I would go to the Dodgers website or the Mets website to get that answer, or I might go to another website like ESPN or Fox Sports or CNN or someone else that I know, or USA Today, that would have good baseball and good sports coverage. In the late 2000s, early 2010s, you started to be able to just simply put the word of the sports team, and the search engine inferred that you wanted the score. In the same way that if you said Los Angeles weather, London weather, Singapore weather, you didn't need to click through to a website like weather.com or AccuWeather or something like that anymore. It just gave you the information right there. So for the last 10 or 15 years, there's already been the existence of queries being answered without having to click through. So this isn't totally new for anyone that's in like the search engine optimization business, content marketing, thought leadership, publishing, media, kind of events businesses. This has been looming for a while. However, what's now happened is we have clickless search results on steroids because AI Essentials on Google and the Copilot version in the Microsoft ecosystem, or if you're going directly to the chat apps, the generative AI powered chat apps like ChatGPT, Copilot, Perplexity, Gemini, Claude, you don't have to click on anything anymore. You just simply ask the query and it summarizes the best, or what that particular model perceives to be the best answer there. And in most cases, you're not clicking through to anything. And most of these apps are voice powered, so you don't even have to type anything anymore, although that was a benefit or amenity for Google search and Siri search and everything for a while. But increasingly what we're seeing is across all demographics, not just Gen Z, not just millennials, not just Gen X, but baby boomers as well. We're seeing people replace going to google.com with instead going to a chat app. And this has massive, massive implications to search engine optimizers, because what this means is a lot more winner takes all. So in other words, it used to be as recently as 10, 15 years ago, that even if you didn't have one of the top 3 results on a search engine results page, there was some people who would click through and look at the other results that were on the bottom of page 1. So over time, and this was impacted by things like geo-targeting and personalization and things like that, over time, your goal would be to improve the experience on your website, improve the quality and the quantity of the inbound links, and overall how trusted of a resource your website was, to be able to get that higher level of visibility, to get essentially more clicks for you to monetize in whatever way that you're looking to do. What's happened over time, and leading up to this, even Google had a framework with EEAT that had a lot to do with experience and authority and trust. And what's happened now is OpenAI and Anthropic and Google and all the other players that are in the generative AI business are basically providing such fantastic consolidated value that there's going to be fewer and fewer people that are looking at a traditional search engine results page anymore. So the goal now is not just worrying about showing up in search, it's worrying about how you're going to get your company to show up in the generative AI results. So when you take that same query on, what's the best restaurant to host a business dinner at in Los Angeles or London with 20 people, and I'm leaning towards Italian food, how do you make sure that your Italian restaurant is the one that's actually recommended, or one of the 2 or 3 recommended? It's the trust signals are more important than ever. The trust signals in most cases are a representation of how your digital brand is perceived by the companies that have these models. How do you improve how your company is perceived by the models? It's largely the same kind of trust signals that have been important for decades, and some parts of the data center ecosystem have done a better job with this than others. In other words, is your website helpful? Does it provide unique value where people were historically clicking through to a page, learning everything that they needed, and didn't need to hit the back button and go to the next search results? In other words, were you the destination site? So increasingly, the challenge with all of this is, in a world where we can't get clicks through to our website anymore, how do we make sure that we're actually recommended by one of these Gen AI tools? Because if we're not, it's pretty much game over. We're invisible. There's a belief that at some point, as the capital starts to dry up, which anyone in the data center ecosystem would say, capital drying up, like at some point, there may be a day of reckoning for these Gen AI tools where they end up having to invent their version of Google Ads to be able to better monetize this beyond charging for access to the generative AI tools. Like, for example, OpenAI right now has, I believe, a $20 a month plan and a $200 a month plan. Alphabet, Google, Gemini was experimenting with charging for its tool. A lot of the business models on figuring out how all of this is going to work are still very much in the air, but the infrastructure, as we know firsthand, is insanely expensive to run. So at some point, there's going to be a moment of reconciling where the capital, Wall Street, whatever, is going to say like, hey, we need to figure out a way for these companies to be more capital efficient. So with all of that in mind, for a data center and cloud services marketplace business to improve its SEO, let's first check our orientation for where a data center marketplace, where a cloud services marketplace lives within the data center ecosystem. They're not a data center operator. They don't own and operate data center facilities. They're not in the data center technology business. They're not in the data center facilities business. They're not in construction, real estate, and investment. Essentially, a marketplace business is outsourced sales and marketing. So inherently, what you're trying to do is arbitrage attention and being able to shift that to, in most cases, sponsors or advertisers who are paying to be listed or have better visibility on your marketplace. And in some cases, you're getting the companies to pay you directly. In other cases, you're getting pay per performance, which is kind of like a more sophisticated version of affiliate marketing or a channel partnership kind of ecosystem. But essentially, you're aggregating attention and you're selling that attention, you're renting that attention to your data center clients and your cloud services clients, because in theory, they can get access to visitors, they can get access to leads, they can get access to potential sources of future revenue that they cannot get elsewhere. So in order for your marketplace business to build a moat, to have a defensible business model that's of interest to companies with significant budget to spend on listings or paying for performance or all of the above, you need to really be fantastic at being able to attract and convert and engage and provide a ton of value, like world-class kind of value. Because at the end of the day, like, you're competing against marketplaces from hyperscalers. Like, I'm sure you're well aware that SaaS companies and cloud services companies all have marketplaces. Microsoft Azure has a marketplace, Google Cloud has a marketplace, Amazon, Google, Apple, Salesforce. These are really, really well-known marketplaces across the board. So ridiculous amounts of inbound authority, whether we're looking at like inbound links or domain authority, whatever you want to call it. So like, yeah, there's an incredible amount competing for your attention. So the question is, what are you doing on an ongoing basis to earn that trust and retain that trust? What are you providing where it's a unique user experience, where your target personas want to spend a significant amount of time on your site for editorial reasons and learning and development reasons that are completely separate from your advertising monetization experience? Because if there's no reason inherently for you users to spend a significant amount of time in your marketplace in the first place, they're not going to visit it and they're not going to stay. Apparently, there's a lot of need for more editorial focused reviews on co-location facilities, because a lot of the co-location operators have gotten too one-sided, too hypey, too self-promotional with a lot of their copywriting. And if you think about like the reviews for like on Amazon.com, I mean, how do you decide, let's say you're a data center technologist, how do you decide what kind of storage array to buy? What kind of solid state drives to buy? What kind of memory upgrades to buy? What kind of uninterruptible power supplies to buy? What kind of battery storage? What kind of generators? In most cases, you're leaning on third-party reviews from your peers, because that's considered way more trustworthy than the vendor-provided marketing content they're copywriting. And this is part of the reason why over the past few decades, businesses that are very heavily review-driven, marketplaces that are very heavily review-driven have thrived. Like Amazon.com, completely separate than AWS. Perfect example of a review-driven business. Facebook certainly has reviews. Google has its own review system. Yelp has its own review system. All the travel sites, all the restaurant sites all the technology sites. People love reviews. And as a result, essentially, that's what your marketplace business is probably trying to do. But in terms of like purely improving your SEO, I think it's a lot of getting very specific about who the buyer personas are that are your core users, getting closer to them than you ever have in the past, really understanding their goals and challenges, figuring out how you can be a learning and development, a professional development destination that complements what they're getting from other professional development providers that help them with like career related trainings and certifications and hosting events that help to facilitate that. At this stage of the game, I'm sure you're doing a lot with video-based content. We know that the video consumption patterns are strongly favoring people wanting to watch content, horizontal video, vertical video, long-form video, short-form video, on-demand video, live video, video across the board. So a lot of what might be fueling your marketplace and potentially replacing traditional SEO is like YouTube SEO, video-based SEO, but also being everywhere that your buyer personas are. For buyers of data center related services and cloud services, most buyer personas, in addition to being heavy users of YouTube, are very heavy users of LinkedIn. So how strong is your LinkedIn presence and all the different facets of individual profiles, company pages, events, newsletters, groups, sales navigator, campaign manager on the paid side? Like, how strong is your LinkedIn game? I would think that's a huge, huge place that you'd want to be investing in to protect against SEO obsolescence, SEO cannibalization. Because yeah, for sure, starting with the rise of OpenAI becoming a household name and ChatGPT picking up tens of millions of users over the last 2 years, yeah, there's this deer in headlights moment for content marketers, for publishers that are very heavily dependent on traditional SEO. So for most companies in that outsourced sales and marketing segment that are looking to arbitrage traffic and arbitrage attention from certain segments of the data center ecosystem to certain vendors that want that attention, you are competing with all of the other outsourced sales and marketing business models in that space. You're for sure competing with media and events companies. You're competing with PR agencies. You're competing with marketing agencies. You're competing with manufacturers reps. Most manufacturers reps need a ton of help in that area. Very, very weak in most cases. You're competing with distributors. You're competing with brokers. You're competing with content creators. You're competing with recruiters to a certain degree as well. At the end of the day, to thrive in this kind of business model, more than likely you'll need to be a destination site that certain kinds of personas come to on a regular basis for community and for education. And the better job with that, the more likely it is that you'll be able to direct a significant amount of that traffic into your marketplace listings and into your monetization strategy. But purely focusing on bottom of the funnel at this point, that last 17% of the journey is probably making your company a lot more vulnerable than you realize. So for improving SEO, go back to the basics. Who is your ideal client? And there's basically a marketplace is two-sided, right? So there's your ideal clients who are helping you monetize either because they're paying for listings or paying for sponsorship or paying for leads or success fees or commissions or whatever you want to call it. That's on the B2B side. On the B2C side, what does the ideal client look like? Usually on B2C, you don't go that deep, but you should understand demographics on the buyer. You don't go deep on the company because on B2C, there actually is no ideal client profile in most cases. You're looking more at demographics and psychographics and behaviors that help you flesh out buyer personas. So for a two-sided marketplace, like on the commercial side, you need at the company level, where they're located, how big or small they are, what industries they tend to be in, what gives you the target account list for the companies that want to have a presence on your data center and cloud marketplace. And then you get into personas. In most cases, depending on the company size, you're probably selling to different kinds of marketing and sales professionals and CROs and chief commercial officers, and in smaller companies, maybe CEOs. That's on the B2B side. On the B2C side, you have your personas. You have your who is the ideal person that you want to be spending a lot of time in your marketplace. What kind of IT professionals are they? Are they from big companies? Are they from small companies? Are they engineers? Are they operations? Are they cybersecurity folks? Are they channel partners? Are they all of the above? And you have unique content that's valuable to each of them that are talking to their specific goals and challenges, not one big amalgamation that you could have gotten away with 10 or 15 years ago, but are a lot more dialed into each segment that matters most, your primary, your secondary, your tertiary. At some point, you have to prioritize and rank who matters most, who pays the bills the most. And that's a CFO kind of conversation, is looking at your monetization strategy that's working the best, that you anticipate working the best, that you think is most strategic to your growth goals. And those personas, especially on the B2C side, especially on the user side for your marketplace, will give you the goals and challenges that you need to make sure that your content and your events are fantastic, world-class, providing exceptional value to protect yourself from potentially being disrupted. How you attract net new users, that's the $100 million question, right? Because going forward, you were likely depending on SEO. Otherwise, you wouldn't have asked this question. So what replaces this? Topical visibility, topical relevance, a fantastic experience around the topics that matter most to your 2 or 3 most important buyer personas when they go ask for advice from the Gen AI tools. And the first cousin of that is having significant presence when they go to ask YouTube for advice, and having significant presence when they go to ask LinkedIn for advice, and whatever other channels come up. Maybe for your specific buyer personas, Reddit is important. Maybe for your particular buyer personas, Twitter is important. Again, X. Again, I can't answer that for you. You're doing your own buyer persona research after you've established what segments are most important. But that's the overall approach I'd use. Go back to the basics, really understand on the B2B side who's helping you monetize, who's helping you commercialize this business. And even more importantly, on the B2C side, why should they visit you over and over and over again? What's going to get them coming back, spending more session time on your site? Obsess over that, providing a fantastic user experience, insane amounts of value. That's what's going to help you improve your SEO and protect your business against cannibalization and obsolescence going forward. So that's how a data center and cloud services marketplace business can improve its SEO. And that's the final question for this week's Data Center Go-to-Market Sales and Marketing Q&A show. If you got good value from this week's show, make sure that you hit the like button to help spread the word. If you have an idea for a topic or a question or a challenge that you think we should address in an upcoming show, be sure to leave that in the comment section on whatever platform that you're watching on. If you want to make sure that you get notified about upcoming educational events and resources just like this, make sure that you're subscribed to the Data Center Sales and Marketing newsletter to get notifications directly to your email inbox on Sundays. You can subscribe right now on our website at www.dcsmi.com. I'm Joshua Feinberg from DCSMI, the Data Center Sales and Marketing Institute, and host of the Data Center Go-to-Market podcast. If you and I are not currently connected on LinkedIn and you'd like to be, send me a connect request and make sure to mention in the note along with the connection request that you watch the Data Center Go-to-Market Sales and Marketing Q&A show. Until next time, I wish you great success in growing your influence, your team's influence, and your company's influence in and around data centers, digital infrastructure, and critical facilities. Take care now and enjoy the rest of your day. Have a great rest of your week. We'll see you next time.
Data Center Go-to-Market Sales and Marketing Q&A is sponsored by DCSMI, elevating the role of sales marketing and go-to-market GTM professionals in the growth of the data center industry. To stay informed about upcoming episodes, subscribe to the Data Center Sales and Marketing newsletter on the DCSMI website at www.dcsmi.com. Again, that's www.dcsmi.com.